If you are at all familiar with the modern Advanced OU metagame, you know Raikou does not get used a lot. It used to be a top-tier OU threat, but over the last several years, the player base became increasingly aware of just how debilitating its flaws are. As a result, it started seeing less and less usage until it got to the point where it was not used once throughout an entire SPL season. Then there was no choice but to drop it to BL, because you could not seriously consider it an OU threat by usage or viability. That's the first part of this video, exploring how Raikou went from dominant OU threat to gimmick. The second part of this video is a lot more positive, because this past year we have experienced a Raikou resurgence. Several top players have been experimenting with Raikou, finding new ways to use it, and seeing tournament success with it. That's the big one. So we are going to explore that. We are going to explore how to use Raikou in 2020 and beyond. I'm not saying that it's going to return to OU anytime soon. It still has to prove itself, but it's off to a good start. So, before we get to that, let's explore what Raikou used to do. So let's dial the clock back to 2013. Raikou has been a top, at this point, Raikou has been a top OU threat since Net Battle, but 2013 is the last time we saw a really dominant Raikou team. This team was incredibly popular throughout the entirety of that year. Absolutely a top 2 team in terms of popularity overall. And, let me adjust the dimensions. So, it was incredibly popular, and it reached a high level of success in many tournaments, not just in 2013, but several 2014, 2015 after. But this was really the last big Raikou team before the period where it started to die out, around 2015, 2016. And, so, this is Dex's Calm Mind Spam team with Calm Mind on 4 Pokemon, Porygon 2, and Dugtrio. It was hugely influential on the metagame, and I don't know if I got all the sets 100%, like EVs and moves and whatnot. Like, for example, I don't know if he ran Raikou, or Roar or Sub on his Raikou. I think he mentioned Roar because it was supposed to beat like Calm Mind Bliss and stuff, but either way, the general idea is the same. So, this team was very popular, very strong, very tough to deal with. It operated at a breakneck pace, and it would just overwhelm you with special spam. It didn't have a lure for Blissey, but it would Calm Mind, pass with Celebi, make Jirachi even more threatening, Raikou even more threatening, especially with all the Blissies being Calm Mind, so you could roar them with Suicune or Raikou if you were using that, or you could pull off a trap with Doug and Toxic P2 and whatnot. So it was a great team. So Raikou was a big part of it because what are Raikou's strengths? It's fast. It's very fast by advanced standards. It's really strong. It's got Calm Mind. It's Stab Thunderbolt. That's great. So how is Raikou used? Generally, on this team and the other teams that Raikou was a part of, then it was used as a late game sweeper. So now we're going to get into the flaws of Raikou. As a late game sweeper, you need to be able to OHKO a lot of stuff. And Raikou is hindered in that department, because both in terms of just not being quite strong enough and in terms of coverage. So that's not necessarily a problem. Like Jirachi does not OHKO a ton of stuff either. It OHKOs a lot, but it doesn't OHKO everything. However, the thing with Jirachi is that it's also really hard to OHKO it back, whereas with Raikou, every Earthquake does. And whereas Jirachi can take a lot of them, and Jirachi is also Sand immune, whereas Raikou is not. So Raikou has to be able to OHKO a lot and not get OHKO'd in return, and it fails on both of those counts. And not just because of its power, Thunderbolt is not going to be dropping T-Tars and Metagrosses anytime soon, and unless they're seriously chipped, but in which case, and of course there's also the part where you have to choose its hidden power. Being walled by Swampert as a Calm Mind sweeper is terrible, but not being able to OHKO Salamence is horrible. So you have a real pick your poison kind of situation there. And then there's the whole Celebi thing, which is, minor, but yeah, so you have your coverage issues, you have your not being strong enough issues, and the reason why this is so important for Raikou as a late game sweeper is because it really struggles to switch into stuff early in the game if your aim is to sweep with it. Like, for example, we're going to compare it to Jirachi again. Jirachi, with leftovers, can switch into, let's say, a Choice Band, Arrow, or Salamence HP Flying, and shrug the hit off, heal with leftovers, and still be in perfectly good shape to sweep later on. Raikou is not the same, because it gets hit by sand, so even if you switch into something as seemingly weak, for let's say, because it resists it, like Zapdos' Thunderbolt, you're not shrugging that off. That's going to hinder you later in the game when you want to set up and sweep. So you can't use it defensively. Not to mention that a lot of the Pokemon you want to switch in on, Zapdos and Gengar, they spam status. So, you get Thunder Waved or Toxic by Zapdos or burned by Gengar, and good night, you are useless. So you can see where Raikou is struggling. It struggles to... It can't be switched... It can't be used early in the game because it gets shut down by those things it's trying to switch into, and late in the game you need to have an absolutely perfect circumstance for everything to work out, because you need to have Pokemon that it's going to OHKO, which is hard. It's hard to set up that situation because of its coverage issue. I mean, even if you're running HP Grass Crunch so you can hit Celebi and you can hit Claydol harder, that still does not solve the whole Mence versus Pert dilemma. And both of those are some bad poisons to be picking between. So now that you understand why Raikou has failed so much, then we can understand why it was used less and less. Why would you want to take up a team? Because when you're not switching Raikou in early in the game, then you are basically playing 5-6. And the reason you would do that is because you know that your 6th Pokemon has a very good shot at sweeping endgame, right? But it doesn't have the good shot at sweeping endgame because it's so hard to knock down entire teams into Raikou range. I mean, teams just naturally check it so well. I mean, we're not even talking teams with Blissey, although those are, of course, nightmarish. But we're talking teams just T-Tar, Metagross, Salamence, Swampert. You can't break your way through that with just Raikou. At the point you get where Raikou is going to be cleaning through those teams is pretty much where something like Zapdos could do it. Except Zapdos can actually switch in mid-game because it has an Earthquake and Spikes and Arena Trap immunity. But it gets into the battle because it can switch in on Earthquakes. And Raikou, of course, has the whole Dugtrio problem, where Dugtrio switches into it because it doesn't even die to Hidden Power. So Sub doesn't protect you, HP Grassing on the Switch doesn't protect you. If you call mine, then you get killed first. So obviously that's where Porygon 2 comes in, but that's another thing that Raikou forces some very rigid structures, because to make up for its flaws, you are forced into a select group of Pokemon. So those are its issues: struggles to switch in, struggles to clean up, forces rigid team structures, and it's just hard to get into a situation where you are going to be cleaning up the opposing team just because everything checks it so naturally. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Arrow. I mean, Arrow is a nightmare for Calm Mind spam, and it's not switching into Raikou, but it's just another thing that prevents Raikou from cleaning through teams. So it's got enemies left and right, basically. So for some evidence that I am not the only person who thought these, then let's go to the viability ranks. This is around 2018. I mean, Raikou had been on the decline for some time now, a couple of years. But this is where we started having everyone submit their own personal rankings, and this is where players started really elucidating, let's say, how hard it was to use Raikou. Fear had a great short write-up on it. Hard to sweep with it because once it's in, you pretty much have to commit. And this is a great illustration of the point I was making, in that you can't switch Raikou in and out throughout the battle because it just gets worn down too quickly. And another reason that I should mention is that people were using Jolteon instead of Raikou because it fit on different kinds of teams that were generally easy to use. Like Spike stuff is fairly intuitive. It's everyone's favorite team style when they get into Advanced because you just you get up Spikes and then you attack, and your attacks are a lot more dangerous with Spikes. And Jolteon's huge speed stat means it doesn't get trapped by Dugtrio. So it actually could, and not to mention Volt Absorb means that it actually completely blanked Thunderbolts from Zapdos and Gengar. Actually, it enjoyed getting hit by them. It healed off Spike's damage or prior damage or whatever. So Jolteon was really popular for its speed and its speed, which got it past Dugtrio, and it did other nice things like check Gyarados, but its lower power was not a problem because Raikou is not strong enough often with or without a Calm Mind to really do the kind of damage that it would like to, whereas Jolteon can dart in and out of battle, healing off with Thunderbolts, keeping momentum with Baton Pass, and not being afraid of Dugtrio. So yeah, people were using Jolteon and not using Raikou. For those reasons, as well as all the Raikou issues we have illustrated and will continue to illustrate. So, Fear mentioned the whole committing thing. Whoops, wrong thread. Yeah, the committing thing is really, really hard, worse than Jolteon. Calm Mind doesn't help it that much. And, yeah, it was only used as a sweeper. So, let's look at how low people were ranking it a couple years ago. UD, as you can see here, ranked it 47th in OU, which was an outlier, but it still spoke to just how low people. It was the most extreme outlier, but it spoke to just how low people were not taking Raikou seriously anymore, because it's not like the general consensus was that it was a great Pokemon. UD was just like, why bother? It's just not getting anything done. So, let's keep going, see if we can find anything. Yeah, no right up here, but Raikou's getting ranked pretty low for a Pokemon that was supposed to be a top-tier OU threat. Below BL Pokemon like Venusaur and Weezing. So, let's keep going. Yeah, Triangles was a big Raikou guy, but he was the only one really advocating for it, and nobody was really seeing a lot of success with it. Actually, Triangles and McMegan, we'll get to those. So, yeah, but even Triangles was not going to deny Raikou's issues. So let me flip through this thread. I think the next page is the one where I really wanted to show, because this page had Fear, where he was where he summarized it perfectly. And here's UD's ranking. So he's putting he's putting it pretty low. He's putting it in, good lord, B-, below Houndoom and stuff. I mean, good Pokemon and all, but this was an idea of just how hard it was. So it's so hard for Raikou to sweep teams. It's like we've mentioned before, and as UD says here, they can tank his hits and OHKO in return. Calm Mind doesn't change. This is a great way to phrase it. Calm Mind only removes Swampert from that list, because after Calm Mind, Swampert can't tank you anymore. But before a Calm Mind, Swampert can easily live your HP Grass and just Earthquake you into dust. But yeah, it counters it organically. And if you want to set up a sweep for it with Doug and a bunch of other support, then a lot of things are going to sweep at that point, like Alakazam. So I even think UD overrates it here by being good at switching into Gengar. It's only good at switching into Gengar if there's no sand and you don't switch into a Will-O-Wisp. In that case, then sure, but then you still have to be careful of the Dugtrio probably in the back. But yeah, so yeah, people are really, really low on Raikou as a whole. See, I mean, people will say, like Cowboy Dan here saying, as you can see, that's Cowboy Dan. Yeah, he's saying, look, guys, I mean, it's nice to say Raikou is terrible, but it has its good points. And yeah, Raikou has its good points, but the problem is that it is very difficult was very difficult to make use of those good points. So, and the big part is here where he says if you avoid status, and that's the hard part. And sand spikes and having to avoid status on the Pokemon it switches into, yeah, struggles. So, let's see. Okay, so this was the second thing I wanted to get to besides those posts up there. Then I ranked Raikou personally at 58, which was the single biggest outlier, because I really I was not having any Raikou at this point in time. There was just no way, and a lot of people agree. Pretty much everyone agreed until, besides McMegan, he was always trying to get Raikou working again using the Dexa style of team. Here's linear, and he doesn't even rank Raikou, I believe. Yeah, he's just like yeah. So this is another way to put it. Only ranked mons higher than C rank don't really care to nitpick whether Regirock is more usable with slacking, and he grouped in Raikou with those Pokemon. So that's ouch. That hurts. So yeah. So Raikou is not getting, and a couple months after these posts, then was when we sent down Raikou down to BL in the same move that brought Moltres up from BL. So where's McMegan's Raikou? Pretty high on Raikou. Yeah, see? So McMegan was a day one Raikou fan. McMegan in triangles. So, yeah, you can see here that we got another UD ranking. Hell yeah. So, he has Raikou a little higher this time, but he's still passively countered by most of the best Pokemon, which is pretty debilitating. I mean, yeah, he's got its good points, but yeah, so now we're going to skip ahead a couple pages and see that... Is this far ahead enough? Yeah, so... Okay, so I went a little farther ahead. But now we're actually seeing Raikou as viable again. So, I believe McMegan used his Raikou team in SPL, and the Raikou was not the super impressive one, if I recall. I'll check in a second. But I wanted to mention that we are now going to go over McMegan's posts about Raikou and what changed it. What has made... Because McMegan was messing around with Raikou for a while, and so was Triangles, but nothing really came of it, because, yeah, Subcall Mine Raikou has its games occasionally where it can be really nice, but that's the key word, occasionally. You want consistent Pokemon on your team. So, what changed? And we're going to check the SPL thing real quick, because... I remember he used the Raikou team, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't their Raikou himself that actually won the game. So it's not that one. Yeah, so this is our first replay. We have more Raikou replays coming up, but this is a thing. Oh wait, no, it wasn't even the Raikou team. Okay, so I was just trying to be 100% there. So. Yeah, alright. So, alright, now I'm finally going to reveal it. This is it. So it wasn't SPL, it was post-SPL that Raikou started to get the attention that it's been receiving for a while now. And it was largely off the strength of this set. So, instead of... Notice how, so far, we have been viewing Raikou as this endgame sweeper. And the problem is that if you use it as an endgame sweeper, you're going to be disappointed because you're playing 5-6 for very little reward, because it's not a very good endgame sweeper. But what if you didn't use it as an endgame sweeper? So a Subtoxic Raikou lead was actually posted by Triangles in, I think, 2016, but it didn't really see much tour success. And then this year, McMegan and Vapicuno and Asta especially was using it very early on, was using it on ladder with Lumberry. So the set itself is already nice, and Lum really makes it as nasty as possible to mess with Zapdos, Gengar, and Blissey. So the twist on how to make Raikou good is to not rely on it as a sweeper, but to use it as more of a sacrificial battering ram. As soon as you don't value Raikou's HP above all else, then it becomes really good. I tried this set out for myself, and it was a world of difference. Because when you try to preserve Raikou's HP, you're just going to end up disappointed. When you just throw Raikou in and start attacking things left and right without worrying about calm minding, then it becomes so much better. So you are able... HPS can be HP Grass if you like, if you want to ruin Pert. But you sub, you scare things out, you Toxic, you beat down things like Snorlax with Thunderbolt. If Blissey comes in, you Toxic it and start subbing. And you run a Modest Nature, because Modest Raikou is still very fast. If you notice here, then Modest Raikou hits 329, which is 1 point above plus speed base 100. So you're still outrunning Salamence, Jirachi, Zapdos, etc. So that is the big one. And we will look at McMegan's team in a second with it. But the idea is that with this Raikou, you're going to just use it early in the game, beat down the opponent, and it gets sacrificed, fine. If you get a sub-up as Doug switches in and they expect to live it, if they're a 0 bulk Doug, then Modest gives you a very good chance to outright kill it. But even if you do get Dugged, then you get to switch in your Porygon 2 and trap their Doug Trio in return. Excuse me, which will open up your Jirachi. So you use it to open up your teammates as opposed to being a sweeper itself. Who knew? We just needed to take Calm Mind off of Raikou. But yeah, I mean, people were experimenting with things like Calm Mind, Modest Thunder with Magnet to Oko T-Tar, and, you know, it's a nice idea, but it's not consistent at all. You know, sand and accuracy and whatnot, it's just, But this is consistent. This is a good tournament-worthy set. So, you can read about this yourself. You can, it's great as a lead because it actually destroys Zapdos lead. And Zapdos lead is famous for harassing most leads that are not Tyranitar, and sometimes even Tyranitar. So you get to reap all the benefits of the Zapdos lead, i.e. the fast Thunderbolt and Hidden Power, scaring out things like Suicune and Salamence, and you get to sub and scout Metagross's set and T-Tar's set as well. And you also get the jump on Zapdos. So you are in a good position. It is a really great lead. So, yeah, that about sums it up. So let's scroll down. Oh, and it lets you use a Zapdos later in the game. We're about to see McMegan's team with it, which he posted. So this is a team he gave me to try out. This is the team that he was having some tour success with. I got confused with the SPL one he used that I pulled up because that one was also had Calm Mind spam with non-Zapdos Electric type in Magneton. But this is the one. McMegan really likes his Calm Mind spams. And as a result, he tries Raikou a lot. But this team is not really a Calm Mind spam. It's a Jirachi clean late game. But Raikou here opens up the game for its teammates. It baits in the Blissey. It baits in the Doug Trio. It wards off the spikes from early game Scarm, really nice. It doesn't get put on the back foot by Zapdos or Salamence. It can scout out Metagross leads, see what set it's running so you don't get blown up or, you know, get so you can see if it actually has Earthquake or not, which gives you a lot of information later in the game. And yeah, so read this, it's very important. And yeah, so this is basically it. And now we are going to explore the tournament game where he used it against Altina in Kalos Invitational, so there it is. Their Scarm runs from the Raikou lead, in comes T-Tar, and you can just T-Bolt it again, because if it gets Earthquaked into dust, then he's going to guarantee it goes down thanks to Doug, and he just wants that T-Tar out of the way. And plus, it might not even be an Earthquake T-Tar, because it might be a special set. And here we see Altina just go for a Roar because he evidently is not a physical set with Earthquake, otherwise he would have just attacked. And yeah, Raikou really exposing the electric softness of Altina's team early on, which can be abused by his Zapdos late game. So here's the benefit of using Raikou when you don't really care about its HP. Look at how much it's done in the first 2 turns. And it's opened up for Zapdos, and it's like, well, T-Tar's in, but I'm not going to run away from it. I'm just going to keep attacking. So that's the beginning. And you know, now we just Calm Mind, Fire Punch, nasty crit. But yeah, so Raikou's going to come back on Scarm, and you know, here comes Blissey. And wait, whoops, I clicked over it by accident. So and now Blissey's in, and you're thinking, all right, whoops, it got Toxicked. So now if Blissey actually stays in and beats the Raikou, then it will get Doug Trio'd easily afterwards. And if not, then something else is going to have to switch into the Raikou, and that's not great. You could feasibly run leftovers on this Raikou set, by the way, if you are not as afraid of status, because it lets you sub-Toxic stall more easily, and against certain Blissey variants, then you are more capable of sub-stalling them, or not getting stalled out like in this scenario. So he wants to make sure that he's not going to get HP Grass with his Doug, so he just sacks the Raikou. But if he was confident that the Mag was HP Fire, which I think he could have been, because Scarm teams and that have Mag need HP Fire so they don't get ruined by Fortress, so I think he could have just gone hard to Dugtrio and then still had his Raikou for later in the game and to keep annoying Altina's team. So this is a great example of how great Raikou is, especially when you send in your Zapdos afterwards. And, yikes. And now the P2 checks the Ments, and, in comes, whoops, I clicked across, so T-Bolt, and, Ments isn't getting anywhere, and so Zapdos is just terrific. Oh. Yeah, so P2 wins. So yeah, that's Raikou for you, and that's what this team does. And that's an example. If you want to use Raikou, then use it like that. However, we are still not done, because while I believe this is the best setup for Raikou in the current metagame, and I think it's the set that's going to keep proving itself as the time goes on, then people have been experimenting with good old Calm Mind Raikou again on good old Dexa-styled Calm Mind spam teams. Now, McMegan, this team, I hope he does an RMT like he says he will. Now, McMegan, with this team, takes a different approach. He doesn't have Dugtrio. He has Vaporeon for Calm Mind passing, for keeping the Baton Pass chain going with Calm Mind, and Agility from Zapdos. So if you pass Agility and Calm Mind to Raikou, then it is deadly. Because if you give Raikou a Calm Mind as it comes in, and it doesn't have to waste a turn on Calm Mind, then yeah, that's really nasty. And matter of fact, that was a strength of Dex's team as well. I think it's, this one. It was a strength of Dex's team that he was able to make Raikou more threatening by giving it a Calm Mind with Celebi's pass before it came in. So then you could sub, and you wouldn't have that Dugtrio dilemma because you'd already be boosted. So that's one way to get around it, and McMegan makes full use of that concept here, and not to mention the Agility Pass Zapdos, which makes it even nastier. So this is another great team. So yeah, this is a good setup. I think this inspired a lot of players to start experimenting with Calm Mind Raikou again and seeing if they were able to pull it off. And I think I have figured out the general idea of how to make Raikou work on Calm Mind spam. So the basic idea is that when you use Raikou, then you don't want it switching into attacks, right? So you gotta have something else that can handle that Gengar and that Zapdos. So if you can do that, then you can preserve Raikou without missing its utility. And matter of fact, this is another thing the Dexa team has going for it. So I think the Dexa team is still something that is worth using, and we're actually going to see that in a second. So this team has it as well, with Celebi helping out against Zapdos and against Gengar as well. With Natural Cure, you can pivot around it. So you can you can pivot around its Ice Punch with Jirachi and P2 and whatnot. So I think that this team has the right tools, and of course you got the P2 to circumvent the Doug factor. So we're going to look at one more replay of Raikou with McMegan using this Calm Mind Pass team, and PDC using, I believe it is, no, actually I won't spoil the result. Okay, so here we go. So Suicune, there's Vaporeon, there's the BP, here's the Celebi. Wait, so now here comes PDC's Raikou. Seeing Raikou on Raikou in this battle was, trippy, because it uses Roar. So he used Roar there to scout for Doug and just to get the pass away immediately. And McMegan went to his Zapdos because his Zapdos has Roar itself. So that's the idea. When you call Mind Pass, then you need a Roar poke for Raikou. But Roar on Raikou, that's, because this team is going to have a Porygon 2. I don't know if it's required that a Raikou team has Porygon 2 these days, but it's definitely something to think about. So now with Calm Mind Roar Raikou, then you pose a threat to this style of offense. And again, another thing is that Raikou does not necessarily, while you want to have stuff that is overlapping with Raikou's defensive utility, that preserves Raikou, but it also means that if you use Raikou and end up losing it, then you still have that utility elsewhere on your team, namely in the form of Celebi. So one of Celebi or Raikou gets dugged or KO'd or whatever, and you're still going to have the other one. So, and, Calm Mind Roar Raikou, of course, has a matchup like this, where it's just going to, he's avoiding the Thunder Wave here, because that would ruin it, but if McMegan is really scrapping for answers here, as, it roars out and just sweeps the entire team, so... And that's what I'm talking about, the thing where he was not afraid to go to Raikou early game because he's okay with losing it. And matter of fact, I think this is actually the Dexa team. He just probably had Jirachi dug later. So yeah, the Dexa team's still very much viable. It's now that it's been looked at again, I think Raikou is forcing people to... Calm Mind Raikou, definitely, is forcing people to be very conscientious of how they build their teams with it because of its massive flaws. But if you can account for those flaws, I think the developments that have been made, the strides that have been taken, have really gone a long way in terms of helping us understand how to work around those flaws and make the most out of Raikou's talents. So, obviously you're not going to be Calm Mind Roar sweeping every single game, but the general idea is that, this kind of setup... the same setup on both styles, on both sides in this game anyway, is strong. It, of course, is going to have its flaws. These teams are not going to love facing Arrow, but that's why something like the agility pass Zapdos on McMegan's team is really nice. That's one way to circumvent it. So that's the kind of innovation that you really hope to see. So Raikou is back. Again, I think it needs to prove itself through a couple more tournaments before it truly becomes OU. Kind of like how people were crying for Breloom to become OU, and it was still a little early. It could happen, but it's going to take some more time. So I think Raikou is in a similar spot. But it's great to see that it's gone from pretty much not being used by anyone to seeing high-level tournament success. Raikou on Raikou matchups, my god. And, Raikou teaming up with Zapdos to destroy Blissey. Megan likes his double electric. Double electric is done before, but it's usually Zapdos Jolteon, not Raikou Zapdos. So, once again, Advance proves to be a breeding ground for wonderful innovation, and I'm really happy to see it. It's, I look forward to how Raikou will continue to find its place in the modern metagame. So I think that's pretty much it. So. If you feel free to look up these threads yourself. I'm showing everything on the screen, so you will be able to find them. But yeah, massive credit to this set, to Triangles for coming up with this so many years ago, to Asta for using it on ladder, for McMegan and Vapakuno for exploring it, and so credit to the wonderful minds in our advanced player base community. And it's good to see Raikou back. I like Raikou. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope this taught you something. I hope you are inspired to get out there and use some Raikou for yourself. Look, it's still got its flaws, but it's, we know it's, we are able to circumvent them now and make the most out of it. So, thank you for watching. I hope this was useful to you. I hope this inspired you to use Raikou. And I hope to see you and Raikou on the advanced ladder and in advanced tournaments very soon. I'll catch you next time.